Hello everyone, my name is Lisa Coley and I serve as the Executive Director of Parapsychology Foundation. And on behalf of our President, Mrs. Eileen Coley, and our Board of Trustees, I welcome you here today. For those of you who are new to the Foundation, and I think I see a few new faces, let me tell you a little bit about the organization. We were established in 1951 by Eileen J. Garrett, herself a well-known psychic of her day, an author, entrepreneur, publisher, and the Honorable Frances P. Bolton, a Republican Congresswoman from Ohio that had a long-standing interest in psychical matters. The Foundation is not set up to convince you of the phenomena and the paranormal, but certainly that there is definitely a question that with scientific methodology and critical thinking and correct information, we can all put our heads together and see if there really is something to it, which I think, considering the amount of material that crosses my desk, there probably definitely is. But I just wanted to allay your fears that we're here to convince you of the paranormal. The Foundation really serves two constituencies, both academia and the public at large. For years we've supported academia through our grant program, scholarship program, conference program, and of course everyone benefits from this beautiful Eileen J. Garrett research library. It's arguably one of the world's largest, and certainly I tend to think it's the best in the United States because it's been professionally maintained since its inception. So it's open to the public. We welcome you to use the resource because we feel like Midas here sitting with all this lovely knowledge. So for sure, come back and use the library. In addition to our publishing program, which consists of our International Journal of Parapsychology over here, we have a scholarly monograph series, an introductory pamphlet series that you'll see around the house here, and also Helix Press has published two quality paperbacks, Adventures in the Supernormal, the autobiography of Eileen J. Garrett, our founder, and also Investigating the Paranormal by Tony Cornell. The Lyceum here that we're all gathered here today is to provide quality information. Since there are so many misconceptions and misinformation about our field, I think it behooves us to really get quality information about parapsychology. And we have a new program that I want to just briefly touch on. It's the Psychic Explorers Club, which has its own website. That's www.psychicexplorers.org. And that's where we invite everybody to put their head together. There's a forum, a message board, discount. I mean, there are other benefits, but really the idea to create a community of those really on their own particular voyage of discovery within parapsychology. So we would urge you to take a look at that and possibly join the fun. Now, the Lyceum courses, we find that people do need quality information, as I said, and as such, the introduction to the scientific study of psychic phenomena is being held today. All of our courses, including the more specialized ones, I think the last one was on psychokinesis, I believe, right? And we've had ghosts and hauntings. Other topics are more specialized courses, but all of these courses are videotaped and are on sale and available to you. At this point, I want to tell you a little bit about your faculty today. You find if you turn on the television, everybody says they're parapsychologists. It amazes me. Very few put the time and effort to be academically bound and truly parapsychologists. Your faculty members today truly are. Let me introduce you to Carlos S. Alvarado, Dr. Alvarado, and Nancy L. Zingroni, who are staff members here. I'm going to read to you the wonders of their CV because I get lost in the sauce. So if you just bear with me, Dr. Alvarado was a research assistant to Dr. Ian Stevenson at the Division of Parapsychology at the University of Virginia. Later, he was a visiting scholar at the Institute for Parapsychology in Durham, North Carolina. He currently is the president of the Parapsychological Association, which is sort of the working union of those academics working in parapsychology. And he is the current president of the Asociación Iberoamericana de Parapsicología, the Ibero-American Association of Parapsychology. He is currently working here at the Foundation, which pleases us immensely, where he serves as the chairman of domestic and international programs, the series editor of our Foundation's Parapsychological Monograph series, which I just mentioned, and he is also the associate editor of the International Journal of Parapsychology. He has conducted research in Puerto Rico, throughout the United States, on psychology, and features most of his work, or a lot of his work, large body of it, with out-of-body experiences. Now, Nancy Elzingroni is an MSED, was a research fellow and visiting scholar at the Institute for Parapsychology in Durham, North Carolina, where she conducted experimental ESP research. She has been the organizer of and a lecturer at the summer study program at the Institute of Parapsychology, and has been part of the board of directors of the Parapsychological Association, serving this year, I believe, as vice president, and will be the president-elect next year. So Parapsychology Foundation really gets a kick out of having all these presidents-elect of the Parapsychological Association. Here she's the director of our publications program. She's the executive editor of, again, the IJP, and the associate editor of the series Advances in Parapsychological Research. So at this point in time, I'm going to turn you over to their truly very capable hands and enjoy the course.
Well, welcome. Today we're going to present a general overview of parapsychology. Basically, what we would like to do is introduce you to the main phenomena of parapsychology, the research that has been done with most of them, the research approaches, the different methodologies that are used to make meaning out of the reports of these fascinating experiences. Also give you a historical context of where is parapsychology coming from, what has happened in the 19th century and in previous years that has produced the movement that we call parapsychology today. One of the most fascinating aspects of this field, I think, is how it has changed over the times. And we're going to show you a lot of transparencies with the phenomena that were more common in previous eras and what is studied mainly today. As you will see, there are many changes. That's part of the purpose of this lecture, to show you that this field, like any other field of science, changes over time. There are different ideas, but it's all fascinating. It still intrigues us, and it's a voyage of continuous discovery. We have 4 parts in this course. The first part are general concepts. Then we move into the historical overview. That ends my section, and then Nancy will cover more in the afternoon laboratory studies of extrasensory perception and some of the work that has been done with daily life ESP experiences. As you may know, where parapsychologists study ESP, both bringing people into the lab and testing them in a very rigorous way, as well as interviewing them and collecting experiences that happen in daily life. Those are the 2 main ways of approaching all the occurrences or phenomena that form parapsychology. And we will present you an overview of some of the main studies, some of them coming from the 19th century, and what we have learned. We have to start saying, of course, and something that all of you, I'm sure, know, that this is a very difficult field of research. As you know, plenty of people do not believe these phenomena even take place. And it's very hard to do research or to try to make sense of phenomena that a large segment of society doesn't even acknowledge its existence. And that's one of the problems that we deal with. But the more contact, I think, that you have with people having experiences, if you pay attention to the actual research, you, I think, can realize that there is really a lot of evidence for this phenomena, that a lot of interesting things are happening, have happened before, are happening right now. People don't talk about these things openly many times, but that doesn't mean that the phenomena are not happening. There are social conditions, psychological conditions that basically determine why people talk about these things or not. We believe that this is an extremely common phenomena, such as dreaming or any other phenomena studied by psychologists. And the only thing we need to do is to change attitudes of the public at large, of the scientific community, to bring first attention to this phenomena, and then, of course, understanding. Because one thing is to show that you have an interesting phenomenon occurring. Another thing is really being able to understand it. And in understanding is where parapsychology is still struggling. We still don't have a clear view of what is the nature of the phenomena. But there are a lot of ideas, a lot of interesting theories, and we will be mentioning some of those as we go by. But let me start with some of the basic aspects of parapsychology. I'm going to show you several slides. If I could have the first one. Yeah, you can.
This back.
The main phenomena of parapsychology are what we call extrasensory perception and psychokinesis. Extrasensory perception is just a term to indicate the acquisition of information without the apparent use of the senses. So you are not listening, you are not looking at something in the usual way, but you still know that something is happening at a distance. Let me give you a case from the 19th century that was reported in a collection called Phantasms of the Living, which is a very young girl is coming from school to her house. And as she's coming from school, she opens one of her school books on geometry and starts just going through the book. Geometry, a subject that supposedly doesn't enhance imagination so much, this girl seems to be very interested in her studies. And at the moment that she's looking at the pages, the account goes, she loses consciousness of her surroundings and has a vision. Completely unexpected. The vision is she sees a room in her house that used to be called the white room because it was mostly white. And she sees her mother in that room on the floor, like almost dead or that maybe had fainted, she doesn't know. She sees in great detail and the mother lying down, the details of the room, and that just disappears almost instantly. She doesn't know what to do with this because it's something so unusual. She had never had an experience like that. But she's convinced that something is wrong with her mother. So she immediately, instead of going home, she runs to the doctor, the local doctor that was fairly close by, convinces the doctor to come with her. The doctor, mainly to calm this little girl that was very nervous, very agitated, says, okay, I'm going with you. They get to the house and they find her mother in that same room that had had a heart attack. They are able to save her. I don't know how much longer she lived, but according to the account, it seems that the event basically saved her life. If it had not been for the prompt medical attention, she would have died. But we have here an interesting vision, something that her whole environment disappears, and she gets information about something she did not know was happening at a distance. Basically, something happened to her mother. She was lying down on the floor. This is what we call ESP, something that apparently, from the account, there was no normal way. She had not heard that her mother was feeling sick. She did not hear her falling down because she was at a distance. She had no apparent normal way of knowing what had happened, but still, she gets this information and she acts on the information. She goes and gets the doctor. That's what we call basically ESP. ESP is divided into different areas: telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, according to the type of information that people obtain. Telepathy refers to the thoughts or the emotions of a distant person. When you feel someone's pain, someone's thoughts, someone's emotions in general, we call that telepathy. Clairvoyance is used to refer to an apparent perception of a physical event. In the case of the girl, it could have been that she perceived the body of her mother lying down. Or in other cases, it could be an accident. You perceive a plane crash or some other event like that. In precognition, what you get is the future. So these are dreams about the future or other types of impressions that give you an information of something that has not happened yet. Some interesting examples, also in a quite a tragic context, are the recent dreams that people had regarding 9/11 here in New York. Soon after 9/11, we here, as well as many other parapsychology places, we got a lot of different calls from people saying, I had dreams that seemed to give information about, what happened on 9/11. One of the dreams was of someone that said that she saw a lot of people running and buildings kind of crumbling and a lot of big clouds of dust following the people, which were very similar to a lot of the pictures that all of us were watching on TV that were repeated over and over again. Some other people said that they saw kind of Middle Eastern faces, some of them with turbans, and after the fact, they put the things together and they thought that those dreams were giving them information about what happened. Of course, the weakness of the cases is that we get all of them after the fact. We didn't get any of them before the thing happened. But almost all of the experiencers were convinced that they had seen the future, having a precognitive event within the dream. Most of them said that they just were not sure what they were experiencing. That they were seeing all these images with a high emotional content, a lot of death involved, but they couldn't say what was that, if that was even something real. And it was only when all those images started appearing on TV and the whole world got to know that they made the connection. So that's why many of them didn't write the things down before, or didn't call anyone beforehand. But that's very typical of what we call precognition of disasters. Disasters and the World Trade Center attack, as well as the other terrorist act on September 11. That's probably the worst example in recent times. But disasters seem in general to attract this type of phenomena. Landslides that killed hundreds of people. When the Titanic went down, there were many dreams associated with the Titanic. All kinds of events where people die in great numbers. There's always a cluster of these precognitive events happening all around. And it's very difficult to study them, but they take place, and people are really convinced because of the details that they get in their dreams. So basically, those are the three types of extrasensory perception. In practice, in daily life, it's very hard to say if something was telepathy or clairvoyance. Like in the case of the girl that saw her mother, it's very hard to say where is the source of that information. She has the vision, but was she getting her mother's thoughts? Maybe the mother, before she fainted, sent an impression and the girl got it. The impression being, I'm feeling bad, I'm going to faint. Or maybe after she was on the floor, still has some consciousness and sent a message of her image lying down on the floor. But it could also have been that the girl perceived the actual physical event, the body on the floor. From experiences like that, we really cannot make a decision of what type of ESP was going on there. In fact, some people even say that it just doesn't even make sense to try to make a distinction because there are so many possible sources of information coming in. And that's one of the problems in dealing with cases. On one hand, they are full of detail. On the other hand, we really have no control of the circumstances. And it's very hard to determine the nature of the process. But you can never really determine that. On the other hand, that ESP is acquisition of information. We also have the possibility of affecting the environment physically. That's what we call psychokinesis. Psycho from mind, kinesis from movement, the whole idea of mind over matter. The mind can affect the environment beyond the confines of our physical body. And there are many examples of psychokinesis, like moving of objects. I will later show you some slides with that phenomenon of people that claim that without touching anything, they can push a little box of matches over a table. In the old days of spiritualism, there were table levitations, mediums, and people sat around a table, and they claimed that the tables will rise in the air, will move all around. That will be an example of a physical phenomena that could very well have been caused, in some cases, by psychokinesis, maybe from the medium. Again, the physical phenomena of spiritualism is a very difficult area, and it's full of fraud. We know, we have records of a lot of fraudulent performances. So you have to evaluate each case on its own, according to the reputation of the medium, the context, how detailed the report was, things like that. But that's the type of phenomena that we include when we say that objects can be moved. Biological organisms, by that I mean people that can affect, say, the growth of plants. a plant being an organism, some people have prayed over the plant or touched the plants or just concentrate their attention on a group of seeds. They put 20 seeds on side A and 20 seeds of sunflowers or something on side B. And you say, okay, I'm going to concentrate only on side A, and I'm going to send good thoughts, wish them to grow faster, or just send good thoughts that I'm your friend, I love you, feel good. Whatever your strategy is, the whole idea is, can you really make this side A grow faster as compared with side B? And of course, you try to give them the same amount of water, the same illumination, so that you don't have any normal explanation from one growing faster than the other. Studies like this have been done at least since the 19th century, and there is a lot of evidence, especially the better evidence is in more recent times, where we get that the group of seeds or plants that were being preyed on grow much faster. And you see, photographs of, a lot big, tall plants versus really small ones. In France, there was a physician, I believe he's still alive, his name is Jean Barry, and he was doing a study with bacteria. He had bacteria behind a closed lab with glass, and he had people sitting on the other side of the glass. And what he was trying to do was the opposite of what I summarized. He was trying to get people to hinder the development of bacteria. Not necessarily kill the bacteria, but to keep it low. And he claimed that he was successful, that he brought a lot of people to do that. And at the end, when he took the measurements, the ones that were receiving kind of negative thoughts of stay there, do not grow, or some people I'm sure were willing them to die, those didn't develop as much as the others, which are a normal growth rate. Of course, the implications for that, for healing, are immense. If it's possible to do that, say to a cancerous tumor or something else in the human body, you can see why people are interested in these type of studies. In fact, a lot of physicians right now that are working in, most of them outside the field of parapsychology and publishing their research in medical journals, are doing what they call studies of prayer at a distance or distant healing. And the whole idea is having a healer or sometimes a group of healers send thoughts to pre-selected patients that already have been well studied, medically. They have all the medical information, blood counts, and all kinds of things. And later on, they can compare that information of those that received the distant healing treatment versus a control group that no one was trying to pray for or influence in any way. And in some of these studies, they are reporting similar effects as with the plants and with the bacteria, that there is an improvement in the condition of these people. If the improvement is enough to be, say, clinically significant, that's a different issue. Sometimes these results are just of a really small magnitude. But even if they are really small, the measurements are taken using the same statistical methods and other procedures that psychology, biology uses, and they seem to be showing that something is going on. If that is the case, we have a case here of psychokinesis over biological or living matter. And finally, and this is more experimental work, psychokinesis has been studied in relation to mechanical and electronic systems. These are laboratory studies where the parapsychologist asks people to come to the laboratory. And he has a machine, say he has a computer, and the computer has been programmed to generate zeros and ones, the numbers 0 and 1. And basically, you press a button and there may be a sequence of numbers in the screen. Also, the current studies are better than that. It's very ugly to have a screen with all kinds of zeros and ones. And what they do now is that they have games and nice graphics and all that. But the main idea is that you try to affect the output of that computer. You try to change that sequence that is coming from the computer, that by chance you should get 50% 0, 50% ones. And what you find in some of these studies is that some people do better. They could do maybe 60% or just maybe a couple of percents over, but it's consistent over thousands of trials. These things are analyzed statistically, and they find out that there is evidence that someone sitting in front of a computer, or sometimes far away or in a different room, seem to be able to affect the behavior of the program of the computer. In the older days, the tests were more mechanical. I mean, things like you will have a pendulum and you have to move the pendulum, or you have dice. The dice studies are very common in the 30s and the 40s, where you will get either one die or a group of them, 10, 12, and you will throw them from a ramp. I will show you some slides of that later. And the idea being that you have to concentrate, say, on bringing low numbers on all those dice, or you concentrate on number 6. I want number 6 to come out. There were many things that people could do. The whole idea was that could be measured in a quantitative way, and you could apply statistical methods and find out at the end of the test if there was an influence. And those tests were done mainly at Duke University by Dr. J.B. Ryan and a team of researchers. They found over the years that they could obtain deviations from chance that were consistent with the idea that there was a psychokinetic phenomena, that maybe the person was affecting the dice. It was very interesting for Ryan to find out that the results did not seem to vary, say, with the number of dice that were used. And for him, that was very important, because he said, if we are dealing just with a normal physical energy that is affecting the dice, maybe the more dice you have, the less good results, the lower the results should be, because it will be difficult to affect a big group of dice, but one of them will be much easily affected. But he said that he didn't find that difference, that there could be a lot of them or just a few, and the results seem to depend more on the attitude of the person. If the person thought that they could do it and had a positive attitude and felt good about it, the results were better. There have been similar results of that on ESP in the laboratory. Because before, although I emphasized cases of ESP also has been brought into the lab and studied under controlled conditions. And later on, Nancy will get more into that. But the whole idea is to put people in separate places and have someone grab, say, a picture and look at the picture in one room and try to send an impression of that picture to someone in a different place. And the results sometimes have been very successful, very impressive. Again, all this stuff is evaluated statistically. At the end of a lot of trials, a lot of tests, you basically make your computations and you find out what was expected by chance and what are your results. Some of the experiments sometimes do not show much, or sometimes they show just a very small deviation. But even if it's very small, it should not have happened. And when you accumulate a lot of those small deviations, you can get a better picture of what is happening across the experiment. But again, Nancy will get a little more into that. This, in a nutshell, are the basic phenomena of parapsychology, or at least the phenomena that people are paying more attention now in research today. However, as I'm sure you all know, there is much more to parapsychology than only ESP and psychokinesis. There are phenomena such as out-of-body experiences, in which persons feel that they are leaving their physical body. One example being a police officer, a young woman police officer that wrote to me sometime in I guess it will be in the late 70s. And she said that she was still new being a police officer. And she was going out following a suspect. She was in the police car with her partner. And she was very stressed out, very nervous, because they were following him. It was one of those classical TV type, persecutions on cars. And it went for a while, and finally they cornered the guy. They went to the car. She said her heart was really pounding. She was really nervous. She didn't know what was going to happen. She didn't know if the guy had a weapon or what. She says that at the moment that they were approaching, she and her partner, they were approaching the guy that was inside the car, the next thing she knew was that she felt separated from the physical body. Without any transition, it was almost like she closed her eyes and opened them, and when she opened them again, she was floating above the scene and looking at herself, her partner, the other policeman, the two cars, and the suspect being grabbed by both of them. She said that she saw herself, her physical body, with a uniform and everything. She saw herself moving and performing, and she was impressed that she was performing in the same way that she had been trained to perform, approaching the guy and doing everything properly. This lasted just a few seconds. The moment they got the suspect into the police car and slammed the door, the other transition, came out. And when she opened her eyes again, she was again in her physical body, perceiving from the perspective of the physical body and not floating, looking down. Before she was looking at the heads of people, was looking at, like floating there. The next thing it was at the same eye level. And she had never had an experience like that. She didn't know why it happened. But this is a typical experience that occurs during high stress. Some of these experiences happen when people are extremely frightened, and a small number of them, the physical body keeps functioning. Meaning that you look at your body and you are still talking, you're still moving around. I had another case of someone that was practicing for a marathon, and she was running, and the next thing she knows, she was floating up there, looks down, and she sees herself going ahead, running as usual. The body didn't fall down or anything. She went out normally. She took the opportunity to look around and was able to see the top of the trees, mountains at a distance. She was amazed, what she was seeing. A few seconds just went by, and almost instantly, she was again back in her body. These experiences are, when the physical body is active, again, are in a minority. I like to emphasize them because people seem to think that in most cases of out-of-body experience, or in all cases, I should say, in all cases, the physical body is always inactive, in deep trance, lying down, sleeping. You can say that in most cases, that's how these phenomena happen. Most people are sitting down, are relaxed, or are unconscious because of an accident, or just reading, in bed or something like that. But there is a small number of cases where there is physical activity, which shows how fascinating this phenomena can be and the variety of possible manifestations. I have later on, if you can find, I don't know, these things can go a little out of order. Yeah, that one that illustrates the concept of out-of-body experiences. And the whole idea is you feel that you leave the body. In the examples I gave you, there's not a feeling of leaving slowly. But in other cases, people feel that they slowly float out and leave their physical body, like they were leaving an envelope or a globe. A lot of people describe it like that. And this is a representation from the book, one of the books of Sylvan Muldoon, which in the history of astral projection or out-of-body experiences literature is one of the most famous authors. This was a young man that was sick most of his life in bed, and he had the ability of getting out of the body at will. He could produce experience most of the time through a system of elaborate methods that he developed that were based on the idea of focusing his will and concentration. The book gives all the details of the method because he wanted people to use the method and produce it. He was convinced he was really living out. He was convinced that was his spirit living, that he will survive death. And he thought it was a very important experience, and he wanted people to know what was happening. But basically, those are the experiences that happened to him. It's an artist's rendition, of course, because we really don't have any pictures, of the process of out-of-body experience. We have a lot of representations. I just want to show you some of the phenomena, some of them with illustrations or pictures. And these are things that have been studied, are still being studied, but receive less attention than ESP and psychokinesis. A very important phenomenon of parapsychology that it seems to be making a comeback is the phenomenon of mediumship. The medium is a person that supposedly has the ability of communicating with the dead. People that have died and supposedly their spirits have survived. That's what spiritualism tells us. Spiritualism as a movement starts here in the States in the middle of the 19th century. And a group of people say we can bring the dead back in different ways. A medium is a person sensitive that provides like a door to the other world, and it's a person that can bring, supposedly, information from the spirits of people that have died. This is a case of automatic writing with the famous Boston medium Leonora Piper. Automatic writers were those mediums that sometimes in a trance and sometimes awake will be sitting down, and they claim that a spirit came to them and the message came through writing. And the writing was automatic, meaning they did not do it on purpose. They could be looking at another place. They were not conscious what their hand was doing. And at the end, a message will come that was coherent. In the best cases, and this is the case of Leonora Piper, which was active mainly in the 19th century, from about 1890 to the beginning of the 20th century as well. She was very carefully studied by a lot of researchers, and her automatic writings, her scripts, sometimes will have information that the researchers really could not explain. They could not find why was she able to get names or incidents about the life of a sitter, a person who was sitting in front of them. How was that possible? And of course, the idea of the medium was that it was the spirit, of course. The spirit will come and give that information. But from the very beginning, people were skeptical that even those are accepted, okay, the writing has information that is true. How do we explain it? Then came the things that a lot of mediums were fraudulent. A lot of mediums went out and had lists of the people in society that frequent mediums, and so they have books full of information about people that go around asking questions to mediums all the time. So when John Smith will come in, they will know, okay, John Smith, he's a well-known scientist or a literary person, and he lost a little girl. They will have all that information, and they will fake a communication. That's the importance of studies like these ones with Mrs. Piper, because they try to control her environment. They took her out of the States, they took her to London, they put detectives behind her to find out what she was doing, what information she was obtaining. They try to control all her correspondence. They will bring sitters that she didn't know, and they will introduce them without giving any names or any information after she had fallen into trance. And even after all those conditions, she was able to write or sometimes to say things that astounded a lot of people. The first person that was a scientist that had seances with her was William James, famous psychologist and philosopher, author of the Principles of Psychology and many other the varieties of religious experience. Those of you that are interested in the history of psychology and philosophy will recognize him as a big name. He went to see Mrs. Piper, and from the very beginning, from about 1886 on, most of his writings he will say, I know it's a lot to ask of you to believe this, but I am convinced that this lady, Mrs. Piper, can produce information when she falls into trance that I don't know where it's coming from, but it's veridical, it's true. There is something happening here. Some people will say it's not a spirit, it's telepathy, or it's something else. The main point at the time was, can we start establishing that there is something paranormal? And then later on find out if it's a spirit, if it's telepathy or what. The problem is that even to this day, we have not been able to make a distinction between one process or the other. There is no particular indication that will give us an idea if once you assume that it's a veridical communication, what is the source of it? And that's a main problem with this research. But it was extremely influential in the development of parapsychology because it was one of the first contexts that brought the possibility of having control observations of someone, an individual that could perform almost at will. And later we will see more of that. We also have in psychical research or parapsychology the phenomenon of apparitions, which is one of the most impressive things. One of the most frightening things that people can find is something that appears to them. People close their eyes, when they don't want to see something horrible. The visual unexpected is extremely impressive. And the case of ghost apparitions is a case in point. This is an old painting that basically illustrates this guy was from a noble family, and supposedly, according to the account, he had used this woman. Maybe it was his mistress or something like that. The thing is that she died, and the whole concept of the painting is that she comes from the beyond to basically tell him, you use me, you should pay for that. You did something really bad. So you see, he's extremely frightened. She's there delivering her message. This is a classic ghost, a visual apparition of someone that used to live before and died and comes back. From the early days of spiritualism, there was a lot of emphasis on this type of accounts. And even to this day, there have been many studies, and people are still trying to collect cases of apparitions or appearances that are like that. This is an apparition of a dead person. This is another case of an apparition, supposedly of someone dead, but this is what is referred to in the literature as a haunting apparition. Haunted houses are specific houses, or sometimes places, it doesn't have to be a house, where phenomena happen recurrently over the course of many days, months, sometimes years. One of the most impressive phenomena of a haunted house, other than sounds and senses of presence, but I would say that the most impressive one is the appearance of a figure just like that. This is the famous Cheltenham ghost, a place in England called Cheltenham. And this is a case of a family that moves there, and one of the women in the family, a young woman that was a medical student at the time, Rosina Despard, is how she signs her name in a report that she published in 1892, says, I started seeing a figure, and she describes it like that. And no one else in the family had seen that figure, but she sees the figure, not every day, but every other day, once a week, sometimes more than once on the same day. And she's really puzzled by it. Being a medical student, and at that time a woman doing medical studies was something very unusual, meaning that this was a very capable woman, had a lot of powers of observations, and it's something that she clearly shows in her account. In fact, of all the early accounts of apparitions like this is a unique account, because she really had the sense of mind, of conducting systematic observations and even experiments with this figure. And what she did was she kept a diary. So she goes through the report saying, well, today I saw her again, and I followed her, and as I was approaching, she turned around, and I was never able to touch her. She wanted to touch her to see, is it solid, or if it's just a mist or no consistency at all. She was never able to touch her, as she thought she was going to be successful when she had her in a corner and went right ahead, because this woman really, was very, very courageous. The thing disappears right in the corner. It just vanishes. So she could never touch her. She had a camera, with a big tripod. We're talking about the 1880s, also the report is in the 1890s, and she wanted to take pictures to see if there is something there, something physical. I should be able to take a picture, or even if it's something more tenuous. She was never able to get a picture. One very interesting observation was, again, she started to think, saying, okay, I want to see if this thing can affect matter. What can I do? And she devised a very ingenious test. Sometimes this ghost was seen to come down the stairs. So she went at the foot of the stairs, and she got threads, some normal thread, and then she got pellets of glue, and at the end of the threads, she put a pellet at the end, and she basically hooked several threads in the pathway where the ghost was going to come down. The idea being, if this figure is physical in some way, she should break the threads or affect them in some way. And she said that she was able to watch, at least on one occasion, the figure went to the threads and they didn't even move. There was no movement, she didn't break them at all. So she tends to think that it was completely non-physical. In some occasions, other members of her family could see it. But there were times where only one person, her, in the room, her father never could see it, her sister sometimes could see it. Or sometimes someone will say, oh, I saw her, she's going that way. And another servant in another part of the house will say, I see it over here. It's a fascinating case. You know, they were basically running all around the house to try to catch this thing, and they were never able to do it. But in the course of doing that, they have a lot of fascinating descriptions that allow later an artist to do this drawing. They were never able to identify her. The idea of a haunting, the classic idea is that someone has died, perhaps in a violent way, in the place where these manifestations happen. In this case, they were never really able to identify it completely. Also, they isolated someone, that had lived there before but moved and died in a different place. They think they don't know the identity of the figure, but from the record, it's clear that something very interesting was happening. More than one person could see it, and it happened over a long period. At some point, it started being very rare. Only on occasion will be seen, and from one point on, they never saw it again. Again, it remains a big mystery. This is really a unique case. There are many cases of haunting apparitions, some of them in roads where people see a phantom rider or other things coming like that, but none of them have been investigated in the same way that this Miss Desper, who she later qualified for her medical degree, I should say, and went on to be in contact with the London Society for Psychical Research for some years. The apparition that I show you is one of many phenomena that happen inside what we call hauntings or haunted phenomena, haunted houses phenomena. This is an example from a catalog of cases that was published in 1979 from different places and different historical periods, as you can see. Raps or noises, such as what we are listening to now, we have a ghost upstairs, are part of the phenomenon of hauntings. This was not planned, by the way. This tends to happen frequently when I'm lecturing, and I don't know why. But in many of these cases, you have raps, imitative noises. Imitative means that if you go and you do this, you get the same sound back. It's like an imitation of what you are doing. Voices that are heard, and of course apparitions, what I was talking before. As you can see, the phenomena change in cases, and some cases are more complex than others. This case from Milan, the second one that says raps and hands seen. Hands seen means there was apparitions only of hands, but the rest of the body, who knows where it was. But there's only those two phenomena. Compare that with the case in Scotland following it, where there are several other things reported. So hauntings vary a lot in terms of the number of phenomena, in terms of the intensity of the manifestation. Some of them are very mild. Others are really disturbing and frightening. And if you have the bad luck in being one of those that is really disturbing and frightening, you will not be able to sleep very well at night. But some people are lucky and they just have, very mild manifestations. As you can see, some of them have what it says apparitions in the lower one, and then also misty figures. Misty figures is a type of apparition, but it's something that is more like a cloud or like fog that should not be inside the house. Doesn't have any particular shape. But an apparition means that a human shape, or it could be an animal shape, it was recognized. You could say that's a person because you see that the features, you see the arms, you see the legs. In many of these cases, the phenomena is always highly localized. That's the typical characteristic of the haunted house. It's very different from the poltergeist, which is phenomena that center around one individual. In the haunting, everyone that comes to the house, or not everyone, but most people that come into the house will hear or feel something. The place seems to be the key. In the poltergeist, the person is the one that seems to be attracting or producing the phenomena. So if the person moves to another room, the phenomena go to the other room. And the phenomena in poltergeist, in general, also that's not 100%, tend to be more of the physical type. The classic poltergeist manifestation is movement of objects. Things move around, or raps, sounds like that on the walls. This is a case that happened from the 1840s in France. And it was a girl that objects close to her were repelled from her body. So they will bring a chair, and as soon as the chair approach her or touch her on her skirt or her dress, the chair will immediately, or sometimes a few seconds later, will, in a violent way, will be thrown. and will bounce in the wall or do something. As this illustration shows, she was investigated by a lot of scientists. There were several physicists and scientists from other disciplines that found this very puzzling, and they basically brought her to their labs and tried to see what was happening. One of the tests they did was some of them got a chair, put them close to her, but exerted all their force to keep the chair in the position. Because they will argue, if she's some way pushing this that I'm not noticing, I should be stronger than she, especially putting all my force. But they said that they could not hold the chair. The chair will just move away, and they were never able really to explain it. Some of them thought that it was a purely electrical phenomenon, because it behaved in some ways like static electricity. And that has happened in other poltergeist cases. It seems to behave like static electricity, but then it seems to violate the laws of electricity. Different types of materials are affected. Some effects can happen at a longer distance. It's a very mysterious thing. We can say today that electrical theories really do not explain most of poltergeist phenomena. That's just too simplistic. But in the past there have been some cases, and this is one that seemed to be consistent. And if that was some type of electrical effect, it was a very unusual one. And I frankly think it was really something else. But it shows, the mystery of poltergeist and how they have attracted the attention of scientists. This is an old woodcutting that basically illustrates the phenomenon of dowsing. Again, we're moving into a whole different phenomenon. Dowsing, which is still widely practiced today in this country, in Europe, in other places, is the whole idea that you have a rod, sometimes in the shape of a twig. You can find minerals, you can find water that are underground, and that supposedly you have no normal information to find. What we here find is a person that is walking around, and if they're looking, say, for water, as they approach a place where there is water under, the twig will start either shaking or moving down, pointing to the place. The dowser, after a lot of practice, they recognize what are the correct reactions, of the rod, which sometimes they say that the rod has a mind of its own. It moves, and they say, I am not moving this. It's really moving by itself. Some outside force is affecting it. And when it points out, they call the other guy, say, dig here. And in many cases, you find out that, the water is there, or oil, or whatever it is that they're looking for. And the original theory was that the dowser is able to detect radiations coming from the water, from the oil, from gold, whatever is the thing that they are looking for. These radiations impact either the rod itself or the dowser, and then cause the movements. Later on came the idea, okay, assuming this is successful, and assuming that there are no clear signs, because remember, if there is water on the ground, there could be a wet spot that you could see. But assuming that there is no external cues, another possible explanation that people started offering later on was that of ESP. Basically saying there is no radiation from this oil or the gold that we are trying to locate, but what is happening here is that the dowser, the person that is holding the thing, has ESP abilities, and that ESP ability is channeled through, he has his knowledge, it's channeled through his hands, and he produces those movements to indicate the ESP knowledge that he has that there is water there. So he has the ESP knowledge, there is water there, then without even his knowledge, automatically, like mediums sometimes write things, he will point out the twig or the rod. That was another explanation. And again, that has varied a lot. That's a phenomenon that right now parapsychologists are really not paying almost any attention. So you hear here and there that there are scientists, geophysicists, and others that are very interested in this for the obvious implications in mining, in finding. This is one of the phenomena that has a lot of practical applications. Some people do what they call map dowsing, and that's when the dowsers do not go to the actual site, but they stay at home or in some other place, and they use a map to pinpoint the places where they think minerals, water, or other things will be found. This case obviously are not consistent with a radiation idea that something is coming from the ground and affecting the dowser, because sometimes it's been done thousands of miles away. And that's why some people think that the ESP idea applies better in these cases. But again, there could be different mechanisms at work. We really do not know. If we go to the next slide, this brings us the phenomena of healing, which I touched slightly when we talk about psychokinesis. Healing is a very old phenomenon from biblical times. You know, they talk about different types of healing, the healings of Jesus and many other people. Today we have a wide tradition of healers all around the world. This is Harry Edwards, which was a British spiritualist healer. And he said, you know, he channeled spirits and they gave him the power to heal. And he's here treating someone. Basically, as you can see, he puts himself in a very slight meditational state or slight trance and touches the patients and tries to heal them of all sorts of ailments and conditions. Some of these, as I said before, can be done at a distance. There are different types of experiments that have been modeled on this idea. A very interesting line of research was done by Bernard Grad, which was a friend of this foundation since the 60s, and a lot of his early research affecting plants or other organisms was funded by the Parapsychology Foundation. One interesting study that he made was he had healers try to affect water that was later going to be used on plants. So, you know, they had to water the plants anyhow, normally. But one of the beakers was with water that was treated by a healer, and the other one was water that was completely untreated. And what they found was that the water that was treated seemed to affect the growth of the plant more. Also, some of these experiments, bringing them even closer to healing, have tried to see if enzymes that have been damaged, you know, they damage enzymes in a laboratory context, and they try to see if a healer can treat those enzymes and improve, make them better, and there was a few studies that seemed to show that was possible. When they checked the enzymes later on, they seem to be in better shape than before. And again, the implications of that for healing like this is very clear. Could have the next one. Another phenomenon is that of past lives. The whole idea of reincarnation. Have we lived before? Can we come back? And if we come back, how do we show that we were here before? It's a very tricky, difficult thing to do. What I have done in this slide is to show the different phenomena that have been cited in the past to support the idea of past lives. On one hand, there are special abilities or talents. Little children that all of a sudden have great musical abilities and can sit in the piano and do amazing things without any training at all. Languages, similarly, or creativity, that's what I mean there by genius. From the beginning, especially in the spiritualist literature, the idea has been, well, that's a previous life carryover. You know, if you had learned how to play piano in a previous life, of course that child is carrying over from a previous life that ability, and that's why it's coming out without any training, any instruction. That's the basic argument. Of course, that's really not a very strong argument, because there's a lot about human abilities that we still don't understand. And it is possible that there are many ways in which people can pick things from the environment in ways that we don't know. So creativity is still something that we don't understand. How do we learn? There is a lot there. That's why a lot of scientists and parapsychologists don't pay much attention to that. The one that receives most of the attention is the one that is under memories and recollections, especially the one on spontaneous memories. By that I mean people that start having recollections of a previous life. The best evidence here is the work of Ian Stevenson, which is a professor, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, recently retired. And he has made his life work to study children that remember previous lives, especially in Asian countries. He has a lot of cases from Thailand, Burma, India, countries like Lebanon. He also has American and European cases, but in general, the American and European cases are weaker, in the sense that the child here in the States or in Europe generally doesn't give as many details as you find from Asian countries. One of the things he says is that part of that is the belief. In Asian countries, a lot of people that see this phenomena believe in it. The families that have children that talk about previous lives don't find that to be so anomalous or so strange, and some of them even encourage the child. So there is a more positive environment. But in other countries, especially here in the States, for a lot of people here, reincarnation is a taboo subject, or it's an anti-Christian type of subject. And if it's anti-Christian and you come from one of those backgrounds, that's the devil there. You cannot touch that. The child will be prohibited from ever speaking it, or will be sent to a distant aunt or uncle in a different place, or will be punished. And you know that after you are punished physically, a few times, you basically, the child, probably still experiencing these things, will stop talking about them. So probably that's why we don't get the details. That's kind of speculation. But what Stevenson does is that he goes all around trying to interview not only the children to get their memories firsthand, and it's very hard to get to a case when the memories are just starting. Because it takes a while for people to talk about it. It gets to the press, or it gets to an investigator that lives close by. So sometimes he gets there 2 years after the fact, or things like that. But some cases he gets there fairly early, talks with the child, talks with the family, and the child says something like, well, I used to be called Abdul, and I used to be a rich man. I had a wife, I have several cars, I have several bulls and cows, and because in a lot of these countries are from small villages, and farm animals and things like that are very important in the local economy. So you hear a lot about these things. And that sometimes is in striking contrast to the present situation of the child, which is in the present life from a very poor family. They don't have much. They certainly cannot boast of having not even one cow. What he's saying, he used to have several, that he had cars. Sometimes he boasts that he used to have many women. He was married but had many mistresses. And in the best cases can give the names of the mistresses, of the children that he had, in or outside of the marriage. All kinds of details that are very useful to check out. Because this is basically almost like a police investigation. Once you have all that information that the child and the parents of the child will tell you, then the next step that Stevenson does is, let's check this out. You cannot take things only on the word of people, because there are many mistakes in recollection and the like. So what he does is he tries to find what he calls the previous personality. If the guy said, oh, my name was Abdul, I live in the northern part of India, in a village called Rajasthan, something like that. Well, he goes to Rajasthan and he starts saying, do you know someone that used to live here that was called Abdul, blah, blah, blah. And in many of the cases, he's able to find someone, and what he tries to do is to try to see if all the details he already has on paper in his records, he can corroborate those things. And not all the cases are good. Some of the cases are very superficial. He has found a few cases where the families were obviously making up the case for different reasons, but those seems to be in the minority. In his best cases, what he finds is that he can corroborate some of the main statements. So he finds the guy called Abdul. He said, okay, the name, that's one thing that's corroborated. The name of the wife, name of children, and a lot of the other details, the property he used to have. Basically, you tabulate the thing, basically saying, he said, the child said this. Corroborated, yes or no. Sometimes there is ambiguity, of course, but in many cases, your name is either Abdul or it's not. Unless it's a name that sounds like Abdul. And that's when, an ambiguity kind of comes. But most of the time, the best cases are very impressive. And you can see, the tables that he builds that says, yeah, this was corroborated, the name of this person was exactly that. And those are the cases that he believes are the best evidence for a previous life. But there are also, yeah, if I could have that one. One of the things that Stevenson finds is that, as I said, most of the cases come from the countries with belief in reincarnation. The children start remembering those lives between 2 and 5 years of age. Some of them very early on. But he also finds that they stop. As they get older, they forget completely those things. And later on, when he has gone sometimes to check cases more than once, when the child was really small, up to when the child he becomes a teenager. And in the later stages, most of the time they don't remember anything. The only thing they know is, well, my father used to tell me that I said I had a previous life. And they have a lot of information, but coming from the father, from the mother, from another member of the family. But they really cannot remember from their own memories at that time. So that's another characteristic of the cases. He finds out that in most cases there are violent deaths in the previous personality. And a lot of these places happen in small villages where there are still, it's very easy to have accidents of drowning in rivers. You know, especially young people are walking around, they fall down. Many of his cases in Thailand, Burma, people die from snake bites. They're in areas, so there are a lot of snakes, running around. Children or a worker in the fields, they go out, and a snake just comes out, grab, and that's it. By the time they grab the child, take him to the local hospital, they don't have a car, whatever, it dies right there in their arms, and it's a sudden, violent death. There are also a lot of murders at the different areas where there are murders. But violent death has a very high rate. Phobias, meaning fears to specific things, particularly the things that were related to the way the previous person died. So if the story is, I used to live in a village and a snake just jumped and grabbed me and killed me immediately, they're extremely afraid of snakes or of water if they drown. And water is not only on a river, which will be the scene of the drowning, but it will be water, even a glass of water at the beginning. Or, the child is taken for a bath and he cannot tolerate water in the body. And later on, slowly, the story, comes out. Philias is kind of the opposite. Philias are things that people really like a lot. Some of these children have food that they love, but no one in their family eats that. And that's very significant in a place like India, because in India, in terms of the social classes, there are certain groups that eat or do not eat certain things. And all of a sudden, there is a child that has a taste for something that is very unusual in the family, or is extremely expensive, and they just cannot afford it. Like smoked salmon or caviar or something like that. That for a family in that village, that will be kind of very hard and very onerous, to buy a little thing of caviar. But the child has this thing and craving and asks for it. Most of the time they don't get it because the family just cannot afford it. But the most interesting part of his cases, and the more dramatic in a way, is the birthmarks and the birth defects. And that's Stevenson's recent publication. He came out with 2 very thick volumes that he has been working on for many, many years. I worked for Stevenson for about 4 years, and all the time I was working for him, he was working on his magnum opus on birthmarks and birth defects. And this is the features of the cases where the child that is now telling you this story has physical evidences related to the previous life. Say they find well, let me give you one example that Stevenson told me just before he hired me to see if I will get afraid of the type of research he was doing, but it had the opposite effect. I was really more interested. He went to Nigeria to do research, because in Africa there are also cases like this, and there was this case of someone that was claiming that in a previous life he was a real bad guy, and he will kill people, and he was hated by a lot of the people of the neighborhood. It was a really small area in Africa. There, a lot of people carry big machetes, and some of them had fights and kill each other. This guy was very good with the machete, but one day the people in town said, "We have had enough of you," and they basically decided, "We're going to kill you, we're going to dispose of you, you are too much of a trouble for this community." So a few guys basically cornered him and said, "This is it, we're going to kill you." And they had a fierce fight, but the guy was really good, and he killed some of the other guys. But one of the guys basically chopped one of his arms off from up here. The guy dies, no time to get to a hospital, shock, loss of blood. And the child that is telling this story, it was born with a birth defect. That same arm, he did not have the arm. He only had the hand coming from the shoulder. And it was kind of a dead hand. It really was not functional, just hanging there. I always remember that because, he showed me the picture from the beginning, and he wanted to be sure, you're not going to be impressed, you're not going to faint looking at this thing, because a lot of people are very of these physical things. And that's an example. He says from previous lives, it's not only memories or phobias that seem to be carried over, if that is the explanation, but also physical things that have happened to the body. In this case, it lost his arm. The child is born without the arm. He has cases, some of them with autopsy records, and those are the best ones, where people have been shot, and in a very small number of cases, he has been able to find the autopsy that shows where a bullet entered in the body of the previous person, and then what he tries to see if there are marks in the body of the child. And in some of the best cases, he has strange marks like discolorations or moles or something strange but that is in that position. And sometimes they hurt and they behave kind of in a strange, different way. But what is significant is that together with the story of the previous life and other aspects of the case, when he compares the records, the body of the child here, some of these marks correspond to what the doctor in the autopsy record said, that the bullet entered here and it exited here. And sometimes you have a thing of the skull, a drawing, and with the line where the bullet came from one side and the other. And in a very, very few cases, you have that the child, when you look into the hair, there is a mark here and another mark over here, in the position that makes it very consistent with the story. Stevenson doesn't say that he has proved reincarnation, but he is very favorably disposed to that. He says that he doesn't see any other explanation that can explain what he has found. He has many thousands of cases. When you go to his office, there are all these metal files and you pull them out, and cases from Alaska, from Burma, from all around the world, and they're all fascinating. Not all of them are as good as the ones I have mentioned here, but certainly the best ones are really impressive. And they basically bring the idea of, does the mind survive death, which is one of the areas of parapsychology, and that's one of Stevenson's main interests. Not everyone follows his reincarnation hypothesis. Some people try to explain it by telepathy or some other way, but it's very hard to account for these cases, no matter what you choose. The thing is that he has done a very detailed investigation. He has been doing this since the late 50s. And just recently, less than a year ago, he retired, and he's still writing. He still has a lot of cases he has never published. We have a lot of his books right here in this corner, which each book, is a collection of cases from India. And then you have 10 cases from India. That's one book. There is another one, 10 cases from Thailand and Burma, and then from the States and from other places. So he has been very, very active in this area. But still the question is open, is this really proof reincarnation or not? And that's always hard. But a lot of these features seem to be very suggestive. This is basically to show phenomena that parapsychologists really generally do not include. There are a lot of mysterious, strange phenomena. There is a lot of weird stuff in the world right now. But not everything belongs to parapsychology. Like acupuncture, astrology, yoga, all those things have their own fields, and they all have an impact in one way or the other on parapsychology. But so those dreams and hypnosis and many other things. That doesn't mean that hypnosis, multiple personality by itself, that they are parapsychological phenomena. You may have phenomena like telepathy happening during hypnosis, and then that will make it relevant. But hypnosis itself is not considered a parapsychological phenomena, at least not now. It used to be considered like that in the late 18th century and in the parts of the 19th century. But in science, many phenomena change, and they are more explained with particular mechanisms, and they move from sometimes from one field to another. And that has been the case with hypnosis and multiple personality. By synesthesia, I mean those people that have an ability to perceive. Let me see how should I explain it. You perceive something and you express it in a different sensory modality. Let me give you an example to make that clear. These are people that they sit down and they put a piano piece of Chopin, and they're hearing the nice piano melody, but together with the sounds of the piano, they're seeing colors flashing. That's synesthesia, because the whole idea is that you turn sound into a visual color perception. Or there are people that go around and they can touch a surface like this. And they see colors, or they feel taste by touching things. This is not considered part of parapsychology, but it sounds weird and it's really very mysterious. There is some type of translation in which something that comes through some particular sensor is transformed internally into something else. And people are studying it. There are a lot of studies now with the new technology, PET scans and MRIs and all that. There are people that can very consistently produce all kinds of these phenomena. But it's not considered part of parapsychology. It's considered that it's just an unknown neurological mechanism. El chupacabras is a fascinating thing. I saw a chupacabras once, but it was not a real one, I'm afraid. Chupacabras is like a creature, like a small monster that supposedly kills goats, and it happens in many parts of Latin America. I heard that a lot in Puerto Rico, where there were accounts of all these creatures being seen by people, and there are accounts of creatures all around the world. There is the Yeti, there is the Loch Ness Monster, there is all kinds of creatures that some of them may be real, other may be people with disguises. We don't know. We have to see each case on its own merits. I think there are many unexplained things. It's not so easy to dismiss all these reports. But just because there is a strange creature or a strange animal, that doesn't mean it's part of parapsychology. It could be that belongs to zoology, the people that study animals. And it could be like a dinosaur, as some people say, is still alive in the middle of Africa. Like those movies like The Lost World, where there are mountains around an area, and there is a protected area inside where there are pterodactyls flying and stuff like that. I don't know if that's possible, but people say, there are reports of monster that looks like a brontosaurus from Africa. Some people say that has been reported, and they have sent expeditions and they have not been able to find it. But the whole idea is, just because it's mysterious doesn't mean it belongs to parapsychology. Parapsychology tends to focus more on these unexplained phenomena that show that human beings have the ability to transcend their perceptual and motor abilities. So affecting the environment, like all this psychokinesis thing I has been talking about, surviving death, like in the reincarnation things, getting information through telepathy, kind of mind-body interactions. But something like the chupacabras is not necessarily parapsychological. However, some people claim, and there is something to study there, that phenomena such as UFOs, that some see just as extraterrestrial craft, if that's what they are, then they're not parapsychological. They're just little green men from Mars coming to visit, period. And they're different, they're strange, but they're not parapsychological. However, in some of these cases, when they make contact with people, there are claims that the communication is done through telepathy. There are things like that. In that case, then there is a connection. And it could be that some of these cases are related to parapsychology, but it's not very clear if the UFO phenomena by itself is parapsychological. Most people in parapsychology do not consider it to be, and you see that the people that study UFOs are completely outside in the field of ufology. They tend to be more engineers and other hard sciences types, that go around taking pictures and measuring the imprint of a UFO when it landed in some place, or looking for the dead bodies of the occupants of a UFO, all the kind of stuff that we see on TV. But again, it's very important to discuss this, because the world, as I said before, is full of unexplained phenomena, but parapsychology doesn't study all of them. There's a lot of weird stuff. So all these phenomena that I have been mentioning can be grouped, I will say, in the left side of this slide, into three different areas. One being the abilities of human beings. Can we move objects without touching? Can we heal people? Can we have dreams about the future? Those could be abilities that we have, and we are studying human potential. When I say abilities of other organisms, it's basically an extension of that, but asking, do animals have ESP? Recently there have been all this interest in dogs that can anticipate the return of their master. You know, you are working out in your job, and when you come back, your dog is there with dinner waiting for you, you know, right there. Well, not with dinner, but it's there, you know, very anxiously waiting, and supposedly waiting a few minutes before. And of course, sometimes you could say, okay, that's routine. Dogs are intelligent. All pets are intelligent. And they may figure out that around 5:30 or around 7:30, that's the time. So they're there waiting. Why? Because they're hungry. And that's it. That could be it. But some people have tried to do studies with this, and they try to account for that, you know, for routine. And they say, no, that doesn't explain it. You know, there are times where people come back in an emergency, or they come back because they forgot something 3 hours later, and the dog is waiting in a place where the dog is not usually there. You know. So the idea is maybe it perceived through ESP that the person was coming back. That's an example of the abilities of animals. That's a possibility. There is another phenomenon called sight trailing, which is these animals that get lost. You are traveling, and your dog jumps out while you're passing through Arizona, and it gets lost, you cannot find it, and later you go to Alaska, some other place, and a month or 2 months later, a very skinny dog looking just like that, very tired and very dirty, like it has traveled thousands of miles, appears in your yard or by you, and you say, what, this is Spot. And then they try to look, you know, for identifying marks, and many families said that they have been able to assure themselves that that was their pet. Sometimes it's a little parrot that flies, or a cat, or something like that. So the idea is, how could an animal in land that is completely strange to them can find a family after they have been separated in a strange place, and then the family is in another place that is also strange for the animal? How can the animal reach that place? The whole idea is there is some type of telepathic connection. We don't know exactly what that is exactly, but those are the tales that people use to support the idea that animals have abilities. And of course, the old traditions, animals howling when someone dies, animals perceiving ghosts or apparitions. In many of the haunted houses, the more sensitive organisms are dogs or cats. You know, many times the first that see something unusual is the dog, and you see the dog, you know, looking around, and later people start seeing things. So there's a long tradition of sensibility in animals that go into the parapsychological. And the other major area, which today is not so popular, but it used to be before 1930, 1940 in parapsychology, is the study of the idea of survival of bodily death. And that is, does mind or consciousness continues after death? We talk a little about mediumship, channeling, you know, writing messages from dead people. That will be an example. There have been many studies of mediums to try to see if the information that is obtained can identify an individual. That is the whole main idea there, is to prove survival of death. The same with Stevenson's reincarnation work. It's a whole different phenomena, but the main issue is I lived before, and instead of communicating through a medium, I came back physically again, and I'm in a new body. So you have to find identifying marks, either mental or physical, that will give you an indication if there is survival of death or not. And that is extremely hard, even harder than many of the other tasks in parapsychology, because as I mentioned before, the whole idea is, how do you make a difference between a possible spirit influence, say in a medium case, or maybe the medium is using his own telepathic abilities. Mediums usually work face to face, and if they tell you, I know your uncle died, his name is John, he used to have headaches, and he had a tumor, or they will tell you, you know, he made a lot of money in the oil business, and all of those things are true. Well, that could also have been obtained through telepathy from you if you know those things. Or if you go, sometimes people go to see a medium and they take their aunt or their mother, or sometimes they take the whole family. Someone in the family sometimes knows something. You may have seen the performances of John Edward on TV. It's what we call a platform medium. What John Edward is doing, there is nothing new in what he's doing, nothing novel. What he has been doing, the history of spiritualism goes back into the 19th century of mediums that will stand just like I am in front of an audience and will start giving readings to individuals. The only new thing that he's doing is that he's doing it on TV and on primetime TV. That is the thing. And by doing that, he's making mediumship better known and he's spreading more out. That is what I would say is really the new thing that he's doing. But a lot of what he does, you could also say that is telepathy or has some other explanation. You know, he gets images. He's not a trance medium. And not all mediums fall in trance. You know, a lot of mediums just see visions, like him. That sometimes he sees someone and he says, "I see lilac flowers, you know, behind you, or a mango tree, and there is a lady that says that her name is Laura," or something that sounds like that. That's the type of thing that you hear a lot from people like John Edward, because they perceive in images. They see things around you, or they hear voices, a lot of them being symbolic. So he says many times, and many other mediums also, that what they see is not literally true, but they have to interpret sometimes. And some of the things they say are surprising, you know, amazing. Other times you are never sure how much information there is coming from the audience. In parapsychology, we can never take very seriously performances like John Edward, not because we're saying that the guy is dishonest or that we really cannot say that. I don't know him personally, but it's a question of the control of the situation. Sometimes information flows in normal ways that is very hard to control. The way someone is dressed, the way someone reacts to something that you say, sometimes can give a lot of information. That's why what parapsychologists will say, saying, "This is great, but come please to my lab, or let's work under these conditions," where you try to see if the medium can perform and get those details about that dead person in an environment that is more controlled. And there are a lot of records in parapsychology that show that that is possible. John Edwards himself has been supposedly performed in some laboratory studies. Leonora Piper used to do that. Eileen Garrett, that founded this place, used to perform in the best controlled conditions all around the world with all kinds of scientists from different disciplines. So it's possible, for mediums to perform well. But the question is, once you assure yourself that, okay, this is information about my uncle and this is true, once you reach that stage, the question is the source of the information. Is it really Uncle Harry that is dead and is coming through this medium, or is it telepathy or something else? The same even with a ghost. There are many theories about ghosts. Some of them may argue that when you see a ghost, like the one that I showed this slide with the lady with the handkerchief walking around on her face, some people will say that's a spirit right there. Others will say no, yeah, that's a spirit, but it's telepathy from a spirit. So the situation is a little more complicated there. And then others will still say, no, you're wrong. There is not a spirit. There is not telepathy. What happens there is a psychic imprint in the place. By that meaning that people believe that in some places, when conditions are right, and they tend to be rare, high emotions can be imprinted in an area, in the atmosphere of a room, maybe in the walls. And that's there, and that can be played back, provided you have someone with the sensibility to play it back. So it's like, if we have a floppy disk, there's nothing you can do with a floppy disk unless you have a system that you can put the floppy disk in and read it. And then the system has to be compatible. If you have an Apple and it's an IBM thing, you may have trouble. You have to make a conversion. There are all kinds of things like that. With this idea, it's something similar. And the whole point is that some people that are sensitive, that can read these emotions in the place, they can come into an area and see a figure like the one that we show there, but that doesn't mean that that's a conscious figure or that there is a spirit present. This is an image from the past, just as we would play a videotape. That's basically the idea. And as you can imagine, all these ideas have remained only as theories because we really don't have the ways to test for them. In science, we have to try to test ideas or hypotheses by taking measurements, but our technology is still not developed enough to say measure emotions in the environment. that type of thing. There is a lot of theory. There are people that have tried to do things, but we still don't have reliable detectors to do that. So the ideas of this sort are still kind of in the air. But there are some cases that seem to be consistent with that, especially those cases where the ghost doesn't seem to be too conscious and is only walking like an automaton. But not all cases are like that. So it's a very complicated situation. When you see a lot of the cases recorded through the history of this field, some of them seem to be explained in one way, others in other. I myself am inclined to believe that we have a mix of different type of phenomena. That is too simple just to say all ghosts can be explained through one mechanism. And a lot of other people have said that, so that's really not original. But that makes our task really much harder. But it's a question of, keeping on and doing the research. Before concluding, I just want to put a word of caution that probably is common sense to many of you, but to make a distinction between, what parapsychology tries to do and what we see more in the media and in the general public. And by that I mean, parapsychology tries to bring science and tries to be as systematic as possible, and sometimes it's not possible, in the study of all these phenomena, with all kinds of different emphasis, from the psychological or medical point of view or any of those approaches. But sometimes we encounter all kinds of claims in the media that we have to be careful with. I'm referring to information from all kinds of popular books or TV programs such as the X-Files. The X-Files is a fascinating program because it has helped raise interest in the paranormal. But at the same time, it also has exaggerated and distorted a lot of the things from the records of parapsychology. So they get phenomena, say, that have been reported to be slight effects, but since they have to present, of course, a good story, instead of slight movements or something, you see the whole house crumbling down. Or people that just look at you and cause you to be in flames. You get fire all around and you die. People that have the power to do that. In serious parapsychological studies, we have never been able to document those things. So you always have to be careful about those sources of information, because even when we consciously know that Hollywood is exaggerating because they need to put a good show, the effect of those things after watching them a long time, they filter kind of our mind, and sometimes we form ideas about psychic functioning from sources of information like that are really not accurate. It's like the way also mediums work. In real life, psychics and mediums, also there are many that are good, they also have a lot of trouble. The information sometimes doesn't come through so clear. It's not so easy. But sometimes in some of these programs, the medium just comes, he touches something, the whole story comes out very clear with details, sensations, all kinds of images, and it's very accurate, with some exceptions. An example maybe is the Dead Zone, which I like the Dead Zone a lot. It's really an interesting program, but I think they tend to exaggerate a little the level of accuracy and consistency that these abilities have. You go and you read the lives of Mrs. Leonard, an old medium, Mrs. Garrett, also very talented. They all had abilities like you see in the Dead Zone, this TV program, and many others, but they also had their periods where they could not produce anything. So it's not as simple as that, that the phenomenon is always consistent, always there, or always reliable. There are many interpretation problems, and a lot of the time there are mistakes that are just found out later. So we have to be careful with what the media will present and what science is presenting us. This, of course, is not unique at all with parapsychology. You go to psychology, when people write about hypnosis, about meditation, about psychotherapy, and you get a lot of distortion on TV, the things that they have therapists doing, sometimes completely unethical things or procedures that a lot of psychotherapists will think it twice before. They're on TV, they're doing things like, that they do that every day. It's a whole different purpose. Science has tried to document, tries to do research. Media is entertainment. And we have to be very aware of that, but I think that's a particular danger in this field, because psychic phenomena are so sexy and attractive when they are on the screen that you can do a lot of things with them. Certainly, they're a great tool for artists, to play with all our psychology, our culture, and so many things. But we have just to make a distinction for entertainment and for possibilities, things that we may discover later. They are fine, But in general, we have to be careful from using those things as sources of reliable information.
Hi there, my name is Lysette Coley and I serve as president of Parapsychology Foundation. I want to welcome you to the Foundation's YouTube channel. There's already a wealth of information available posted, and we have plans to continue to post our classic lectures and new materials, so you don't want to miss out. So hit that bell, please subscribe, and you'll be notified. And hope you enjoy.